Lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. Say to John the Baptist in the question. John the Baptist asks, are you the one, or should we? Yes, I'm the one. Answer that way. So John the Baptist be like, can't he just give a straight answer? Instead, what Jesus does is give evidence for what he's about. It's really important to understand that Jesus is confidence in prophetic words, okay? Now, when it comes to prophecy related to Jesus, what was not immediately his day is that Jesus' prophecies about Jesus would occur in two different, what we call advent. Scholars have helped us get a visual for this, that when we look out on the horizon of these mountains that surround us in this beautiful area that we live, and you might look at one mountain, and there'll be a mountain right behind it, and it looks from our vantage point as if those things are just, 50. But in reality, they may be 6, 7 miles distance between those two. To us, it looks like they are on top of one another, but in reality, there's prophecies of Jesus. There are many prophecies of Jesus that refer to a time yet still future that we have yet to experience. Empire, his kingdom over the entire world. We are still in an intermediate phase. But in Jesus, there was a ministry that he was about that was unique for that time. Jesus king, but as a servant. Jesus comes not to distribute the wrath of God upon a sinful world, but to bring the wrath on a white stallion, but on a donkey into Jerusalem, right? Because he comes in peace in this first advent. So when he gives the evidence to John the Baptist as to what he's about, he says, I come, the lame are walking, the deaf are hearing, the blind you think. Now, all of that is rooted in Old Testament expectation for what Jesus would be about. Criteria. And so John the Baptist and us are left with our own ability to decide for ourselves. And my point with bringing this to bear is to say this. One of the accusations that gets lobbed against Christianity sometimes unfairly is that Christianity is blind faith. You just kind of close your eyes and jump in, and then it'll be true for you. That's never been the case. Christianity has been rooted in evidence, rooted in reason from the very start. And it might be things related to the existence of God that people question, and we can say there's evidence for the existence of God himself. If any of you are, comes from the philosopher Immanuel Kant, who said that he believed in God because of two things. He said the starry sky above him and the moral law within him. I've found it very helpful to think of the illustration used by the philosopher William on the sands of the seashore, and there discovered a little device on the ground with hands and gears on the inside that caused those hands to go across a numbered face. You would not look at that and go, what kind of crab did this? You would look at that and go, there's a watchmaker somewhere. A watchmaker designed this because the watch itself has all of the evidence of design. And when we look in the world around us, the evidence is everywhere. From the stars, our bodies to the atoms beneath our feet, everything shouts designer. And that's what Kant was saying. Why Romans chapter 1 says that those who are rebellious against God, it's not that God has not made himself clear in unrighteousness, because his invisible attributes, his eternal nature, have been clearly presented to them. So the starry skies above us, he also says the moral law within us. I'll give you an example of a conversation I had some weeks ago with someone. This person said that they felt like Christianity had imposed upon them an overwhelming sense of guilt that had made their life agony because of the guilt that they experienced in life, which was causing them to suffer. Understand what they're experiencing, and I don't want to dismiss the emotional being said. I said to this person, I said, I think applying guilt of conscience to Christianity uniquely. No, not just Christianity. They said all religion. All religion makes people misunderstanding. I said, I think guilt is a human condition. Right and wrong. And all of us are aware that we are violating that. And we, each of us, feel, regardless of religion, we feel a sense of cosmic guilt associated with us. And I told her, I said, so the ancients, souls feel better. In the modern era, becomes one of the richest men in the world on the backs of in his plants. And what does he do with the last few decades of his life? Gives almost all of his money away. Why? To atone the guilt that he had accrued through his life. Today, Bill Gates is doing precisely the same thing. And it is an evidence for a lawgiver that I have inside of me. Now, the prophecies of the Bible, they say one is coming who alone can atone, can cleanse, rid you of that sense of an afflicted conscience. The Bible anticipates one, and Jesus is that one. And how do we know it? Prophecies. There are literally from the Old Testament that Jesus fulfills. A statistician, you may have heard this before, did a little work to try to gauge the likelihood that this could take place. And this individual took just 8 prophecies. If Jesus fulfilled just 8, born in Bethlehem, for instance, that he came out of Egypt as an example, that he was born of a virgin, just to name 3 that Jesus fulfilled. So what would be the likelihood, the probability that this would be the case, that he would just fulfill 8 of those? And that statistician said that it was 1 in 10 to the 17th. Are you impressed? He knew we wouldn't understand that. So he gave us an illustration. That illustration is you take silver dollars and you load the state of Texas with 1 layer of silver dollars, and you mark 1 with a red X, and you mark 1 with a red X, and you blindfold an individual and tell them to walk into the state of Texas and find the red X. That's the probability that Jesus would fulfill 8 prophecies. And yet he fulfilled more than 300. I leave it up to you to decide whether you find that persuasive or not. But here's the point. If that's true, if Jesus is who the Scriptures, not just him, the Scriptures claim him to be, then it no longer matters whether he matches up to what you think he ought to be or not. What matters is whether you match up to what he says you are to be or not. It doesn't matter if you lob your judgments at him. What matters is that he stands in judgment, and will you bow the knee? Because Jesus goes on to say this, verse 6, "Blessed is the one who is not offended at me." That word offended, Jesus is giving the blessing of the faithful at this point. Interesting Greek word. It's the word scandalon, from which we get our word scandal. In other words, make no mistake about it, Jesus is a scandal. Jesus is an offender. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you've not been offended by Jesus, you've not been paying close enough attention. Because he will offend you. He will strike at you. There are things about you that do not match up, and it hurts when they get pointed out at you, okay? He is a scandal. So Jesus is saying, with this way he phrases this, he's saying, you're going to get offended, okay? Blessed is the person who does not stay in that condition of offense. So in other words, it does not matter that you doubt. It matters what you're going to do with the doubt. Will you use the doubt to run from him, or will you use the doubt to lean into him? Will you allow the offense to be something that brings you into submission to him? If Jesus has never offended you, you can rest assured that you do not have a Jesus that is made in God's image, but a Jesus that is made in your image. And if it is a Jesus that is made in your image, you have an idol. And that idol will collapse, and you with it. Your unmet expectations will take place, and you will be offended on the back end of that. So what do? What we do, if we are to do this faithfully, is we aren't to be shy about our doubts. Be honest with them. But we come to Jesus with them. We become seekers of truth like John the Baptist, and not people who assume that our questions have no answers. That we have suddenly stumbled upon the smoking gun against Jesus Christ, and it's all a big lie. But to instead realize that if 2,000 years of church history has taught us anything, it is that this book stands the test of time. It has been scrutinized more than anything in the history of the world by archaeologists, paleontologists, and astronomers, and the list just goes on, and philosophers. And the Bible stands, for the Word of God actually says, the grass withers, the flower fades, human beings die, but the Word of our God shall stand forever. Jesus will offend you. What you do with him is what makes the difference. There's a passage in conclusion in Matthew chapter 21, verse 44, where Jesus compares himself to a stone. He says, I'm the chief cornerstone. He said there's two types of people, and the relationships that they have to this stone are this. He says there are those that the stone falls on. They are crushed. And then there are those who fall on the stone, and they are broken in pieces. So you don't get out without a scandal. But one type of person is crushed, and one is broken. And broken things get mended back together into the image that God wished you to be to begin with. Do you have doubts this morning? Intellectual, moral, circumstantial? What will you do with those doubts? Do you think Jesus is able to handle your doubts? Do you think he's worth leaning into? I plead with you this morning as a fellow doubter. Don't run from him, but use your doubts as a reason to run to him. For the Bible is riddled with people who have, that's been the nature of the relationship with God. And I'll just say this lastly. Faith, it's not possible where doubts don't previously exist. That's been the nature of the relationship with God. And I'll just say this lastly. Faith, it's not possible where doubts don't previously exist.